So I think I want to kind of like stay on the theme of inclusivity and, from David's keynote earlier, as well as trying to, the theme is about empowering seamless and secure mobile experiences. And we've talked about regulatory, SMB, registration. So, at the end of the day, how do we pull this all together into an experience that is worthwhile for the consumer? And what I want to bring is, different voices in the ecosystem. So these are my panelists. We'll maybe have some competing thoughts, some complementary ideas. I would love the panel to just pun your ideas with each other, like we're having a lunch conversation. So first of all, I want to kind of at least introduce my panelists. First, Mary Clark, President and Chief Operating Officer of Numeracle. Don Holloway, VP Global Sales and Business Development at Aegis. Simeon Coney here on my left, Director of Vice President of Business Development at ENEA AB, and Craig, Director of Solution Consulting and Vendor Operation at Solutions by Text. So maybe I'll kick off with Mary. Introduce yourself. Tell us about your organization, what you do, and what are your thoughts about this topic?
Thank you. So my name is Mary Clark, and I'm here representing Numeracle. Numeracle is on the voice side. So we're providing solutions to where enterprises can avoid being mislabeled for a call that they're placing outbound, either spam or scam, by registering their numbers with the analytics engines that are in place prior to getting to the three terminating service providers, T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon. We're doing that through performing a KYC, a Know Your Customer activity, in advance of registering that call. So you've heard many times this morning about the idea of using and gathering data about an enterprise to vet them in advance. We do the vetting up front, but then we do ongoing monitoring as well of that traffic, of that voice traffic, and then we also do remediation for those numbers, because often they can fall afoul of any algorithm that could change at any minute of that filtering, and then we vet them every year. So you've heard a lot of similar statements about how that could potentially, that kind of process could be relevant to the way in which text messaging traffic is handled today. I will say, while I'm part of voice, I'm representing the voice channel today. I've been in mobile for a long, long time, and I was at Cineverse for a long time, and I understand text messaging, and I spent a long time in about 2016, 2018 trying to promote RCS, so I got the scars as well of that. So I can definitely talk about both of these particular topics, but I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Don?
Hi. If you're not familiar with Aegis, Aegis is a global leader in brand intelligence and assurance. We provide compliance, vetting and verification, and partner vetting. And the idea is to help reduce risk for our ecosystems and the different people in it and create a safer business ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. And maybe Simeon?
Yeah, absolutely. So with ENEA, or Adaptive Mobile, as many folks may know us. We're very much about doing that in-flight monitoring and control and management for delivering security. So predominantly messaging here in North America, but in terms of our portfolio, we also do cover things like voice, also signaling, even network API protection as well, because we're seeing the nature of the attacks that are occurring. Folks are absolutely omni-channel. The bad folks have embraced that, I would say, probably more than faster than any other industry there. I think certainly for ourselves, it's always that challenge of how do we make security invisible but effective, and it's a pervasive, ongoing challenge. It really is.
Craig?
Good morning, everybody. Craig Temkin, Head of Solution Consulting, or as it's commonly known at other firms, Solution Engineer, Solution Architect, and Vendor Operations at Solutions by Text. Solutions by Text is a specialized messaging and payments gateway focused on highly regulatory and highly compliant industries. We work very closely with banks, credit unions, billers in the US, which is anybody that sends you a bill at the end of the month, as well as any utility companies. So mission critical business messaging that needs to go out. So secure and trust needs to be enforced on both ends of the spectrum, both for the consumer that's receiving this text message and now has to have the confidence on clicking that link to make a payment, as well as the brands and the enterprises that are sending them out. So last thing you want to be aware of is that, you want to make sure that your credit card payment goes through, or that you've paid for your utilities and they're not going to send out a truck. Mission critical with business implications downstream.
Thank you. So I know you guys bring different value to the ecosystem. So maybe we can kick off that conversation. Don, what part of the value that you deliver in terms of delivering the seamless experience?
Well, customers want an experience that's both seamless and secure. Where that gets tricky is a lot of what's good security practices work against seamless. So if I take multi-factor authentication or complex passwords, these actually add friction. So what that means to me is unless we make the investments in the ecosystem to protect the ecosystem, we're forcing those trade-offs onto the consumer. Either we're exposing them to unnecessary risk, or we're creating such a challenging process that they'll just want to go around it.
Okay. And Mary, on the branded, there's a whole topic on branded calling. Any thoughts on, how could we use that, more effectively? Maybe on voice, but could be in messaging too.
In terms of the way in which branded calling, or just
or in general,
Yeah. So what's been fascinating to me this morning, and I don't know about the rest of my panelists, but in particular the previous panel talking about how registration in the last few years has become so helpful in many respects to create a level playing field. The friction comes into play though when there's, let's call it a difference between the way in which one CSP may treat an enterprise versus the way another one might treat an enterprise, and their willingness to potentially take on some traffic that is perhaps a little more dubious than it rather should be. What's going to make things, I think, change is if there is more agreement that it's not only that we have to register the campaign, we have to do more in equal fashion across each player inside the ecosystem, that delivery chain that was talked about a couple of panels ago, right? All the way from the operator moving back upstream to the aggregator to the CSPs and all those middle players in between, as we heard so clearly this morning that we're going to have some more regulation hitting everybody all the time, and more enforcement and more possible fines that are going to happen. We need to be playing, I think, a more consistent role of enforcing amongst ourselves in the ecosystem. Look, if you're going to take on this entity and send their traffic, what are you doing to validate that entity is who it says they are? What are you going to do? And how do you make sure that they stay that way? And until the ecosystem changes its mind that it's not going to tolerate letting dubious actors through by certain CSPs, it's just going to remain the same. There's a level of self-policing that I think, the industry and the ecosystem has gotten through a little bit. And certainly I think the registration process has certainly helped that. But we've got a much longer way to go here. We're still willing to let players come in the door because there's money, right? There's a financial incentive to have players come in the door that we don't know who they are. So until we're willing to change that process, the friction's going to be that end consumer is still going to potentially get spam and fraud, and we're going to have an enterprise over here that's going to be like, I don't want to spend the money on this channel because I can't guarantee that my consumer is going to feel comfortable hitting my text because they don't want to touch anybody's text. It's the same thing that's happening on voice. We have 66% of the consumers out there today do not answer a call, even if it has the name of the business on the call. We just did a consumer survey back in April and checked to say, okay, if you're going to get a call to you, do you feel comfortable answering that call? The majority of the people say no, right? Do you all answer your call when you get something you don't know what it is? No. It's the same thing. We're teaching consumers to not trust consistently any of these channels. And until we, make a decision to say we're not going to allow any of our players that are in this ecosystem to allow dubious actors in, we're just going to continue to get the same, and I don't care if it's SMS or RCS, it's going to continue. So there's my friction statement for today.
Any thoughts from the other panel before I jump into the next question? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I'm going to say,
sure.
Loss of trust is almost irretrievable, once it's gone. And I actually think some of the challenges that we've got, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
I think, up until now, we've operated, frankly, in a very siloed ecosystem, different infrastructures, different players, and it's all been fairly straightforward to control. I mean, yes, absolutely, the challenges have been getting more and more as the attackers have found a way to get around, for example. But I think, though, particularly as we start to see more and more what we consider, let's say, blended inbox, RCS and iMessage and SMS and MMS all ending up in the same app from the user. The user's perspective of that is if they start to find bad things in that app, they don't care what channel it's coming in. Mm-hmm. They will stop looking at things. And I think that is a big challenge for us because no longer is it, let's say, a complete vertical slice that there is at least a known span of control. We've got dramatically different players, different ecosystems, different architectures, even different abilities to enforce, let alone different regulatory environments on each of those services, but are all appearing in that one location. Yeah. And I think that is a big, big challenge for us.
I have a question for Craig, actually. You guys operate in a very vertical, highly regulated, compliant environment, So how do you address, the need for a seamless, secure trust issue?
Well,
yeah.
We use a multi-layer approach. So to stop bad traffic even coming onto our platform, we vet them intensively. The first port of call will be general counsel looking into the actual enterprise and the company themselves. And a very granular investigation to the point that if you're registered in a state that you can have anonymous directors, that is a red flag. We tend to not move forward with that company. So sorry for all of you that are registered in Wyoming. That is a definite red flag. We go one step further then with our compliance department. Our compliance department vets every single campaign. This is how are you capturing opt-in? What is your cadences for messages? Are you stating message rates and data rates apply? We have to answer not only to our clients, the enterprises, but as well as a lot of government associations and regulators because of the industry we're in. Not only is it the CTIA, the MEF, the CFPB, the TCIA, every government acronym you can imagine we have to adhere to. So there are multiple overlords, if you will, that we have to, what's the word I'm looking for, have to appease. And in doing so, it's not so much seamless on the onset because it is a rather, I don't want to say onerous, but a very thorough vetting process before you get your campaign live. But you have the reassurance going forward that once you are live, you can scale. Your campaigns have been approved, that you're not going to worry about a word that you say in your text message because your text message is a template that's been approved by general counsel and everybody else, so that you can build on your campaigns and your services.
Right. Any thoughts from the panel on the regulation and compliance piece? Yeah.
I just love that. This is a great example of the kind of hurdle, this is an incredible hurdle for an enterprise to have to traverse, but it's, the level of the kind of vetting that, lends itself to trust further upstream and even down to the MNO. And I do have sympathy for the previous panel on the SMB side. That's a lot for them to potentially cross that hurdle. But again, it's this idea that you've done this work up front to such an extent that your customers are very, very appreciative of that because they know the level that they're trying to put in so that their consumer, who they're trying to reach, feels good about that. But it's that kind of thing that, is really, the direction we should be going.
Any thoughts, Don?
Yeah, I agree with what I've heard. We know the things, partner verification, fraud monitoring, prevention, that help protect an ecosystem, keep the read rates high, make it an effective ecosystem. To me, we need to continue to emphasize that these are table stakes and it's what makes the channel valuable. I like to highlight the fact that there's a strong relation between actual service revenue and the quality of the ecosystem. All too often it's just viewed as a cost center.
Yeah. I've got to say, I'm going to take a slightly alternative view, just because if you like, so much of the process is designed for, let's say, the ideal flow. Know your customer, are they doing the right thing?
Right.
Unfortunately, we're in the position of having to sort of spot the other side of things, which is folks trying to deliberately obfuscate. I mean, things like, vetting and enforcement of campaign is absolutely something we do. But account takeover, I mean, we heard it on the last panel session, that is such a big problem. And I think we're going to only see more of that. Why bother try and convince somebody that you are a legitimate business when you can just actually exploit somebody else's identity and credentials? The fact is the global ecosystem enables connectivity. Why do I even have to bother trying to do things domestically in the US when I can just reach it from other parts of the world and I can get to the same user, to the same app, to the same inbox and get the same effect? And I think sometimes here we perhaps also need to sort of stop looking at adding more friction on just the domestic sphere that we can control and take that step back and going, okay, what are the impediments now to being effective? I mean, again, we heard on the previous panel, information sharing. We have intelligence and we are typically prohibited from sharing that across domains. Where are the bag attackers? Why actually are they doing that? How do we actually stop them? There's so little remediative work to actually stop someone doing something bad. The amount of fines that actually get collected is, I think, still pretty low. We don't really see people getting prohibited from doing that bad work. Otherwise, we're all just ending up having to do more vetting, trying to find new things, enter, new campaigns, trying to chase new content. It feels we're getting busier and busier, and we're not addressing it at root.
Well, I mean, just to add to that, that's why I feel that there's not going to be one particular silver bullet that's going to solve this. I think it's a combination of various factors, of which technology will be one of them. We've been to a few talks and workshops already at this event about network IPs, network APIs that are coming around. That I know that beyond verified senders and read receipts for our banks, geolocation, location tagging, geofencing, SIM swapping, protections of those will just go a long way in validating the trust on both sides, for the consumer and for the enterprises. But you're right, collaboration and, display, or should I say, the flow of information is another one of those pillars that is desperately needed.
If I could put out one other thing, Vijesh at an earlier session talked about how emotion bypasses our logic, right? And what we're seeing is a lot of bad actors immediately tagging on to hurricanes, disasters. So, I mean, our heart all goes out to that example of the hotel that's saying, hey, I can't prove who I am, but it's really important. And it is, but how do we know, right? So these are tough problems.
Right. So I feel that there are solutions and there are approaches. We probably have different complementary tools and ways to address this. But maybe is it what's missing? What's missing? Is it the education, justifying and making it seamless with the right collaboration and making it easy for the customer? What do we have to do better or more?
Well, if the objective is to essentially make the circle of access, if you will, for somebody to commit fraud smaller and smaller and smaller, so that they're being put into this corner, if you will, through technology, through different. It is. I agree with you completely. It's a multi-factor approach, not to use the other MFA, but. I do think that, is this a conversation, because I do think also too, we're so focused here in this particular show in just the United States, but this is truly a worldwide issue. And I think about the statements earlier in the beginning with the market data and showing that WhatsApp and the transition to WhatsApp and what's going to happen, as that becomes, more prevalent. This becomes we've always, in mobile, we've always been chasing the fraudster, right? We've always been chasing, always from the very beginning. We're chasing, trying to find that way to, come at them from all different angles to put them in as small a box as possible. But I do think it's taking the conversation and going up a level in sophistication and saying we need to look at network APIs. We need to be looking at the ways in which we can use technology to monitor the ongoing traffic flow. We need to be requiring a level of KYC up front that is uniform. But I think what's really missing is the willingness of the ecosystem globally to say, if you want to play here, you need to be willing to support these actions, and you're going to sign up to support these actions. That's the toughest part, right? Yes. Everyone sitting in this room is probably saying, look, I do everything I possibly can. I'm a good actor. I don't want any bad actors coming in. We're not the problem. I mean, right? Yeah. We're not the problem. But it is to say, how do we make it so that the entry is so difficult to be in this, to be perpetrating, the crime, if you will, make that so difficult that it makes it more and more of a challenge, so that the fraudster has to do more and more. So I think it's imposing more on the ecosystem as a whole that the real challenge exists. It's say we have to step up our requirements. If you want to play, you got to do more.
And I think in order to do that, to get the buy-in, you need to help educate as well as to control the narrative, to reposition your offering to show the value that you're actually providing. We get companies approach us all the time and they go, well, what's your per message rate? And I go, well, you're looking at it wrong. How much is it going to cost you to get sued? How much is it going to cost you to get shut down? What is the opportunity cost to your business? Because you're looking at it from a commodity-driven scenario as a per message, as opposed to the value that you're going to be getting to your organization and to your consumers.
And that means changing the persona of who we're selling to as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so often we're selling to that person that looks at this and says, okay, I've been paying this much per message now. Who can I go to that's going to give me a lower message rate?
Yeah.
We got to be talking to the CMOs. We've got to be talking to the general counsels. We've got to be talking to those types of people to say, this is your business brand safety. This is not a part of your telecoms cost center.
Yeah. I think exactly that's critical, because this industry's got history. Just let's look at grey routes. Identity has been around. People can have a short code, for example, or they can have a number. But what happens is 2, 3, 4 years down the line, procurement start to go, well, our cost has been going up. We now want to see cheaper options. People end up buying grey routes. They use a whole range of identities. So I think, how do we get back into that, saying, right, okay, that there's going to be an effect to the reputation of your business. Your customers will be damaged. They will lose confidence in that channel. How do we actually prove that business case so they continue paying, frankly, for the protections that they get from those legitimate channels? There is a cost as a result of buying something cheap that's often hidden.
Yeah. You're talking to the advertisers in the world, really. Those are the ones that are probably, have got the most investment in brand safety.
Yeah, I do get it. It's a very big topic, and it's a vision and mission that we all should continue to carry forward in any of this discussion. I guess we have a few more minutes, but I do want to kind of wrap up and kind of just, to the other session that we had. You may forget most of it, but your main takeaway, if you have to say one or two things to remember, what would you say about this topic and this theme and what we have to do next? Yeah. Maybe I start with Mary, and we'll continue.
I've talked a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. I've talked a lot. I think you've gotten my message. We need to be demanding more of the ecosystem in general to step up technologically as well as on the upfront KYC.
Don?
I think the really good news is brands and consumers both want this next generation of trusted, branded communications. Logos, the reason they're reaching out, are giving value to everyone. We need to do the hard math of building the business cases to demonstrate why we need to make those investments as an industry.
Maybe Simeon and then Craig.
Yeah, goodness. I mean, I was going to say, I think with each new channel comes a whole set of new challenges. Absolutely, we can see things that are occurring now. I mean, RCS, for example, there's a myth that end-to-end encrypted means that it's safe. It is not safe. We've got to stop persisting the myths that are challenging things, and then, yes, bring it back to, okay, well, what are the problems? How do we solve them? Because I think, we're very enthusiastic about these new services, and we sometimes forget to keep learning the old lessons and applying them to these new services.
I think we all realize how powerful this channel can be. You only have to look at the open rates of text messaging versus email. I think email is like 4 or 5%, while text message is like 95%. Even if it's spam, you're looking at your phone and going, oh, do I need to action this? Do I need to request it? Your eyeballs have already been drawn to it. And with that in mind, I think you have to think of it as a long-term perspective, a long horizon of this channel. And we all need to protect it. We all remember the heydays or the cowboy days of premium SMS and where that led to. We don't want to repeat that history. We want to protect something here that is very valuable to ourselves, to our customers, to the ecosystem. And in order to do that, we all need to educate everybody in that ecosystem to the value that it can provide.
We do have some time for Q&A.
Yeah, I don't have a microphone, so can I grab you? Thanks. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you. This is awesome. I'm John, the founder of 1440, which is how many minutes in the day we have. We're a big Salesforce.com partner, and so work with a lot of big enterprise brands. And obviously, AI is agents and AI agents. And how do we make sure that AI agents that are going to exist in the future are not the bad actors, right? Because if it starts learning and doing its thing, it's going to figure out that maybe it can exploit these channels and maybe not be what we want them to be.
Anybody want to take that?
I'll take a first, Pat. Great question. One of the things that we use is, what's your purpose for reaching out to someone? And when that purpose seems to be different, that's an indicator that there may be takeover, there may be fraud, or creep. But by definition, a lot of conversational AI is morphing and changing. So how do we look at those guardrails? That's something I think we're looking at, but we don't have solutions for yet.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing evidence that people are using AI to create scale. At the end of the day, attackers want people on phones to be able to engage with the victims, to try and create a dialogue, to get them into a channel, to get information theft, purchase, product, whatever. And we're seeing them use AI because, first off, it can be automated. It can give them a very credible interaction. It's also multi-language. I mean, I think we often forget quite how important that is. And yeah, the ability with generative AI to create things is staggering. And yeah, so it is most definitely an absolute real problem. And that's let alone, I think, the scope for then doing generative content to try and impersonate brands. So I don't have an answer. I'm just hoping that, let's say, the whole AI ecosystem itself is also recognizing some of these challenges. This isn't limited just purely to mobile, I feel.
Yeah, and they're using it, also to do vectoring, right? So they can make the phone call, follow it up with the text message immediately. So they're using AI to attack in such a specific way. So again, this just goes back to what I said earlier, which is that I think the forum, I think the ecosystem has an opportunity to say, we have to go up another level in our sophistication, because it's going to be just get so exponentially worse. We have to be demanding more of what we do collectively.
Nudge.
Hello, Alex Duncan, Open Mind Networks. Just a question on the business case. Who pays for all of this?
I mean, it goes back to what Craig said, right? It's got to be part of the value proposition. It's got to be the enterprise. I mean, in the end, right? This is, and I am going to be sympathetic to the small and medium business. I mean, I do understand that the majority of the businesses registered in the United States are certainly micro enterprises, less than 5 individuals. But for these cases, in order for us to do anything to repair the damage of this particular channel, we have to be doing more to justify the rationale that we are taking more action to get ahead of the AI business case. And it is going to end up having to be a part of the value proposition. And really that value exchange to say, we're doing all of these things to ensure that when your consumer reaches for their device and receives that text message, they feel the most assurance possible that it is exactly who they say it is. So in the end, it's going to be the enterprise.
Yeah. And just to echo that, yeah. I mean, you think about the ecosystem, it is the only common point. You know, the enterprise or the end user is the recipient, so they're not going to be paying for this. You know, the fact that enterprise could use any channel. You know, again, it's not just limited to SMS here. You know, we're going to see all these other different channel options. The enterprise is the only source of revenue and, in fact, the only source of commonality in that. So I think it comes back to we have to get better at educating them on the business case of why they should be paying for that. You know, tiny amount of that. And maybe that value is taken out of the whole ecosystem chain itself, but it still has to be recognized that they are paying for security and the benefits that brings.
And I might add that these are complicated business cases. Some of it is on the user experience. There might be some people in one organization that have funding for protecting their consumer experience. Some of it might come from fraud. Some of it needs to come from the revenue side, right? So that was the point I'm trying to make, is we have to look at all of these and bring them all to the table.
Yeah. Just to follow up, I mean, I guess the point is the money flows down from the enterprises down to the rest of the ecosystem. But the ecosystem has to be prepared to put the systems in place and pay for those systems. And then you get the competition issue. So if I can get it cheaper over here than I can who hasn't got it in, and somebody who has more expensive. So it's a really complex issue about who pays and how we regulate the overall ecosystem.
Yeah. I think, though, what we're starting to see is the impact of not doing that. I think, you know, we have, again, long history of people taking the money, exactly to your point, I think, out of that ecosystem without delivering anything to it. But I think now that we're in this cycle of, you know, enforcement actions and people, you know, starting to make more punitive decisions as a result of bad actors being in there, we're starting to see the cost of that being felt in the ecosystem.
And that's very jurisdiction-based. And we're sitting in the US, and it's clearly the US, but across the globe, we're a million miles away from having the regulatory power and the backup and legal frameworks to actually to enforce anything.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, exactly. I think in a global context, it's just a mess. I mean, I would say actually, when we look at other territories, you know, they have suffered immensely with the withdrawal of some of the hyperscalers removing their traffic. You know, again, it's that loss of confidence. And I think once it's reached that point, again, it's a tipping point. There's no way that traffic is coming back when they've found alternative reaches. So I think maybe those folks have to be the salutary lesson to everybody to say, look, you know, you've got to do it because this is what happens if you don't. But yeah, it's just too big, too complex. You know, the number of regulators, the number of channels out there, the number of players, that there's not enough commonality or consistency or information sharing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's going to be country by country. It's always been that way. You know, it's going to end up being, in order to play and serve the enterprises in a particular country and the subscribers in that country, you're going to have to make that business case each time.
But even beyond, I mean, even before it gets to the regulators, you know, on the macro level, on a micro level, for a lot of these organizations, there's always an opportunity cost. You know, we look at like Con Edison. If that text message isn't getting through, or if somebody's not responding to that text message, it's going to cost them a lot more than a few pennies to do a number scrub on Somos or on the R&D than it is to send out a truck to have that facility shut down. The same thing with a bank. You know, if you're not making your minimum payment, you could have a late charge. You know, we've all been subject to Wells Fargo and those $35 charges. Then you've got to call somebody at the customer service thing. You've got to have that refunded. You know, there's a lot of downstream ripples and implications that could happen from just not spending a couple of pennies on doing a number scrub or a carrier validation.
Well, thank you, guys. I want to thank you and utterly grateful to my panelists here. I think we can continue this conversation for another hour. And we might have some solution. But I think we're ready for lunch. So I just want to announce that lunch is sponsored by Bandwidth. Thank you. And it will be at the Meat
So it's the
Bazaar Meat Restaurant.
Casino floor. So just
Casino floor. So I think, yeah. So we'll be back here at 2 p.m. for the rest of the session for the day. Thank you again. We'll see you then.